It was a Tuesday evening in late September, the kind where the Georgia sun had just started to cool but still left the air thick with humidity. Two brothers stepped out of their older model sedan in front of a small strip mall on the edge of town. The building wasn't much to look at. Faded brick, a flickering neon sign that read, Holloway's Karate and Fitness, and a parking lot with more cracks than lines. But to them it felt like stepping onto foreign ground. They were identical twins. Same height, same build, same quiet way of moving, but anyone who knew them could tell them apart in a heartbeat. One carried himself like he was always listening, eyes scanning, shoulders relaxed but ready. The other moved like water, smooth, calm, but with a current underneath that you didn't want to test. They wore second-hand karate uniforms, slightly too big, bought online after weeks of saving from part-time jobs at the local grocery store. Their grandfather had taught them to never walk into a dojo without proper attire, no matter how humble. They'd grown up in a different part of the city, closer to downtown, where streetlights flickered and neighbors looked out for each other. Their grandfather, a retired Marine who'd served 2 tours overseas, opened a tiny dojo in their garage when they were 5. Not for money, not for fame, just because he believed every young person deserved to know how to carry themselves, with discipline, with respect, and if needed, with defense. He'd passed 2 years ago, but his voice still lived in their bones. Strength isn't in your fists. It's in your stillness. Now, with college applications looming and their mother working double shifts at the hospital, they decided to try something new, a real dojo. A place with belts, tournaments, maybe even a path to coaching someday. They'd heard Holloway's was reputable, strict but fair. What they didn't know was how few faces like theirs they'd see once they walked through that door. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, floor wax, and old foam mats. A dozen students, mostly white, mostly boys around their age, were stretching along the far wall. At the front stood a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper buzz cut and arms crossed. That was Mr. Holloway, the owner. He nodded when they entered, but his eyes lingered a second too long, like he was trying to place them. Not in a hostile way, more like he was surprised they'd shown up at all. "First time?" he asked, voice calm but guarded. "Yes, sir," the quieter twin said. "Trial class is 20 minutes. You'll need to sign a waiver." He handed them a clipboard without smiling. They filled it out quickly, standing near the door while the other students whispered and glanced over. 2 older teens, taller, broader, with the swagger of guys who'd been told they were naturals one too many times, exchanged looks. One nudged the other and smirked. Neither said anything out loud, but the message was clear. What are they doing here? The twins ignored it. They'd seen that look before, in school hallways, at bus stops, even at the library. They'd learned early that reacting only gave people the show they wanted. So they bowed low when Mr. Holloway called them to the mat, tied their belts with practiced hands, and took their places at the back of the line. The class began with warm-ups, jumping jacks, high knees, shadow punches. The instructor moved down the line, correcting stances, adjusting elbows. When he got to the twins, he paused. "Your horse stance is low," he said to the one on the left. "Good depth." A murmur rippled through the group. Praise from Mr. Holloway was rare, especially on day 1, but the 2 older students, Tyler and Chase, though the twins didn't know their names yet, just rolled their eyes. During partner drills, Tyler accidentally swung his arm wide and clipped the quieter twin in the ribs. Hard enough to sting, not hard enough to call foul. "Oops," Tyler said, not sounding sorry at all. "You okay, man?" The twin didn't flinch, just nodded. "I'm good." Darnell, though again no one had asked their names, watched from across the mat. He saw the flush in his brother's neck, the way his jaw tightened for half a second before relaxing. He also saw Tyler's grin widen. That was the moment he knew. This wasn't going to be just another class. Later, during kata practice, Mr. Holloway had everyone perform the basic Taikyoku Shodan. Most students stumbled through it, arms too loose, steps too rushed. But when it was the twins' turn, something shifted. Their movements were sharp but fluid, like they'd been doing this since before they could tie their own shoes. Every block had purpose. Every step landed with quiet certainty. Even Mr. Holloway raised an eyebrow. After class, as they walked back to the car, the quieter one finally spoke. "They think we don't belong." His brother didn't answer right away. He just looked up at the sky, where the first stars were starting to blink through the haze. "Maybe," he said. "But belonging isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn by showing up and staying. Back home, they changed out of their GIs and stepped into their garage. It wasn't much, just a concrete floor, a single bare bulb, and a wall covered in photos. Their grandfather in uniform. Their grandfather teaching kids in the neighborhood. Their grandfather bowing at the start of class, eyes full of pride. Beneath the photos hung 2 well-worn focus mitts and a heavy bag patched with duct tape. Without a word, they began to train. Not to get stronger. Not to prove anything. Just to remember who they were when no one was watching. The next morning at school, a kid in the cafeteria asked if they'd really gone to that karate place out by the mall. Yeah, one of them said, stirring his coffee. Heard Tyler's there. He's gonna test for brown belt soon. The twin just nodded. Good for him. But that night, as they lay in their shared room, the same thought ran through both their minds. This isn't over. They didn't want trouble. They never had. But trouble, it seemed, had found them. And if it came knocking again, they'd answer. Not with anger, not with show, but with everything their grandfather had ever taught them. Because real strength wasn't about throwing the hardest punch. It was about knowing when not to throw one at all. And when you absolutely had to. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. They were twins. They'd always understood each other in silence. The following Tuesday, they returned to Holloway's. Same car. Same juice, same calm in their steps. Only this time they weren't just students walking in. They were something else. Something the others couldn't quite name yet. But they'd find out soon enough. The second week at the dojo felt heavier. Like the air itself had changed. It wasn't just the Georgia heat, though that hadn't let up. But something else, something quieter and sharper, like tension you could taste. The twins walked in the same way they had before. Shoulders back, eyes forward, jizz clean and tied tight. But this time, the glances weren't just curious. They were measuring. Mr. Holloway greeted them with a nod, a little less stiff than last time. Glad you came back, he said, and for a second it almost sounded genuine. But then his gaze flicked toward the back of the room, where Tyler and Chase were stretching with exaggerated loudness, kicking their legs high, slapping their thighs, laughing too hard at nothing. The message was clear. We run this place. The twins didn't react. They never did. Instead, they bowed at the edge of the mat and took their usual spots near the back. They'd learned long ago that showing up consistently was its own kind of power. Their grandfather used to say, most people quit before the real lesson begins. Don't be most people. Class started with basic drills. Front stance punches, rising blocks, side kicks. The instructor called out commands in a steady rhythm, and the room echoed with the slap of feet on mats and the occasional grunt. Everything seemed normal until partner work began. Pair up, Mr. Holloway called. Tyler didn't even pretend to look around. He just walked straight to the quieter twin and clapped him on the shoulder, hard enough to make him shift his weight. Guess you're with me, he said, flashing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The twin nodded once. No words, just readiness. They started with light blocking drills. But on the third round, Tyler threw a punch that wasn't part of the sequence. Fast, low, aimed at the ribs. The twin twisted just enough to take it on his forearm instead of his body. Still, it stung. Whoa, sorry, Tyler said, but he was already resetting like nothing happened. You're kinda slow, huh? A few kids nearby chuckled. Not loud, but enough. The twin didn't answer. He just reset his stance, eyes locked ahead. His breathing stayed even. That was the trick their grandfather taught them. Don't let your breath betray you. If your breath stays calm, your mind stays clear. Across the mat, his brother was paired with Chase. At first it seemed fine. Basic hand drills, clean movements. But then Chase started correcting his form with rough hands, yanking his arm into position like he was adjusting a mannequin. Your elbow's too high, he snapped. Like this. And he shoved the twin's arm down so hard it nearly threw him off balance. The twin caught himself just in time, planting his foot and straightening without a word. But his eyes, those stayed sharp, watching, remembering. After drills, Mr. Holloway had everyone line up for stance practice. Horse stance, deep and wide. Hold it for 1 minute. Most students groaned, knees shaking, back slumping. But the twins dropped into perfect form. Back straight, knees bent at exact right angles, arms held firm in front. They didn't wobble. Didn't sigh. Just held Tyler, standing 2 spots away, leaned over slightly. Must be nice, he muttered, pretending you belong here. The quieter twin didn't look at him. just kept his gaze forward, breathing slow and steady through his nose. But inside, something coiled tight. Not anger. Anger was messy. This was focus. Cold, clean focus. Later, during water break, Chase accidentally bumped into the other twin, spilling half his bottle on the floor. "Oops," he said, not stopping. "Clumsy me." The twin just knelt, wiped the spill with his sleeve, and stood back up. No drama, no shouting. But the other students noticed. Some looked away. A couple exchanged uneasy glances. Even Mr. Holloway watched from the corner of his eye, arms crossed, expression unreadable. That night back in the garage, the twins didn't talk about what happened. They never needed to. They just changed into their training clothes and started moving. First, slow kata, sanchin, their grandfather's favorite. Every motion deliberate. Every breath synced. Then faster drills, blocking, countering, slipping imaginary strikes. Sweat soaked through their shirts, but they didn't stop. Their grandfather's voice echoed in their heads, not as memory, but as instinct. When someone tries to shrink you, don't fight to be seen. Fight to stay whole. They weren't here to prove they were better than anyone. They were here because this was part of who they were. Karate wasn't just kicks and punches. It was how they walked through the world. Calm, grounded, ready. At school the next day, rumors had already spread. Someone said the new guys couldn't take a joke. Another claimed they were too serious. A girl in the lunch line whispered, "I heard Tyler's gonna mess with them again tonight." The twins just kept eating. One stirred his soup. The other flipped through a physics textbook. But beneath the surface, they were preparing. Not for a fight, never for a fight, but for whatever came next. Because they knew now, this wasn't about karate anymore. It was about respect. And respect, their grandfather always said, wasn't given. It was earned, sometimes the hard way. Tuesday came again. Same time, same car, same quiet walk into the dojo. But this time the air felt charged, like before a storm. Tyler and Chase were already there, laughing louder than usual, eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds. Waiting. Mr. Holloway started class with sparring prep, light contact, controlled movements. "Remember," he said, "this isn't about winning. It's about control." But when he paired students, he didn't assign partners. He just said, "Choose your own." Of course, Tyler and Chase walked straight to the twins. "You two keep sticking together," Tyler said with a fake smile. "Guess it's time you learned how real sparring works." The quieter twin met his eyes, just for a second, then looked away. "We'll follow the rules," he said simply. Chase snorted. "Rules are for people who can't handle the real thing." The sparring circle formed. Most students paired off and stayed in their lanes. But Tyler and Chase didn't rotate. They stayed locked on the twins, circling like they owned the space. First round, light jabs, testing distance. The twins blocked, stepped back, stayed defensive. Mr. Holloway watched closely, arms crossed. Second round, Tyler threw a body shot, legal, but harder than necessary. The twin absorbed it, exhaled, reset. Then Chase came in from the side during a pause, accidentally shoving the other twin toward the wall. "Whoops, lost my balance!" The twin hit the padded wall with a soft thud. He turned slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes, those were different now. Not angry, not scared, just done. He looked at his brother, a single glance, no words, but it said everything. Their grandfather's last lesson came back to them, spoken on his hospital bed, voice weak but clear. "If someone forces your hand, don't strike to hurt. Strike to stop. And never, ever strike first." They hadn't struck first. Not once, but if pushed again, they'd be ready. Class ended with bowing out. Tyler and Chase strutted off, laughing, high-fiving like they'd won something. The twins stayed behind, helping roll up mats in silence. Mr. Holloway approached them as they were leaving. "You two? You've trained before, haven't you?" The quieter twin nodded. "Our grandfather taught us." "He was a good teacher," the other added. Mr. Holloway studied them for a long moment. Then he said, "Next week, I'd like you to demonstrate sanchin for the class." They didn't smile. Didn't boast. Just bowed. "Yes, sir." As they walked to the car, the night air felt cooler than usual. Crickets sang in the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "You think they'll back off now?" the quieter twin asked. His brother shook his head. "No, but they'll learn." And that was enough because the twins weren't here to be liked. They were here to stand their ground. Quietly, firmly, without apology. And if the world kept testing them, they'd keep answering. Not with noise, not with rage, but with the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Back home, they trained again. Not out of anger. Out of duty. To their grandfather. To themselves. To the quiet truth that sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is still, until you're not. And they knew, deep in their bones, that the real test wasn't coming next week. It was already here. The third week at the dojo felt different from the moment they stepped inside. It wasn't just the usual hum of fluorescent lights or the smell of old mats, it was the silence. The kind that sits heavy in a room when everyone's pretending not to watch something about to happen. The twins noticed it right away. A few students glanced up when they entered, then quickly looked down. Others whispered behind their hands. Even Mr. Holloway seemed tense, standing near the mirror with his arms crossed, eyes sharp. Tyler and Chase were already on the mat, stretching like they owned the place. But their usual loud laughter was gone. Instead, they kept glancing toward the door like they'd been waiting. And maybe they had. The twins didn't say a word. They bowed at the edge of the mat, tied their belts, same faded white, same careful knot, and took their usual spots at the back. But this time they didn't look down. They kept their eyes forward, calm but alert, like soldiers who knew the storm was coming and had already made peace with it. Class started with warm-ups, just like always. Jumping jacks, knee raises, shadow punches. But even the rhythm felt off, too fast, too forced. When Mr. Holloway called for partner drills, no one moved right away. Then Tyler stood up and walked straight to the quieter twin. Chase followed, heading for the other. Back again? Tyler said, smirking. You guys just don't know when to quit. The twin didn't answer. Just nodded and got into stance. They began with basic blocking drills, punch, block, step back. But within seconds, Tyler started pushing the pace. His punches came faster, harder. Aimed not at the gloves, but at the body. One landed just under the ribs, sharp, sudden. The twin grunted but didn't flinch. He reset, hands up, eyes steady, across the mat. Chase was doing the same, throwing wild hooks, correcting stances with rough shoves, muttering under his breath. You think you're hot stuff just 'cause you stand still? The other twin stayed calm, blocked, stepped, breathed, but his muscles were coiled now, like a spring pulled tight. Mr. Holloway watched from the side. He saw what was happening, but he didn't step in. Maybe he wanted to see how they'd handle it. Or maybe he was waiting for a line to be crossed. Then came sparring time. Free drill, Mr. Holloway announced. Light contact. Rotate every 2 minutes, but Tyler and Chase didn't rotate. They stayed put. And when the whistle blew, they didn't wait for the signal to start. Tyler lunged first, fast, aggressive, throwing a flurry of punches meant to overwhelm. The quieter twin moved like water, slipping left, blocking high, redirecting the force. He didn't strike back, just defended, again and again, but Tyler wasn't playing by the rules. On the third pass, he faked a jab, then swept his leg low, trying to knock the twin off his feet. It was borderline illegal. Sweeps weren't allowed in beginner sparring, but he did it anyway. The twin saw it coming. He shifted his weight, planted his back foot, and let the sweep pass under him. Tyler stumbled forward, off balance. That's when Chase made his move. While everyone's attention was on Tyler, Chase charged from the side and shoved the other twin hard, right into the padded wall. The impact wasn't dangerous, but it was meant to humiliate. To show who was in control, the twin hit the wall, turned slowly, and that's when something changed. His face didn't twist in anger. His fists didn't clench. But his eyes, those went quiet. Not empty, just done. He looked at his brother. One glance, no words. But it said everything they'd practiced for years. Now. In one smooth motion, the quieter twin stepped inside Tyler's next punch, caught his wrist mid-air, and dropped his hips. A simple hip throw, clean, controlled, no extra force. Tyler hit the mat with a soft thud, more surprised than hurt. Before anyone could react, the other twin moved. He didn't charge. Didn't yell. He just stepped forward, caught Chase's arm as he turned to gawk, and applied a basic wrist lock. Just enough pressure to make him drop to one knee, wincing, but not screaming. Whoa. Someone shouted. The room froze. Tyler scrambled up, face red. You cheated, he yelled, pointing at the twins. You're not supposed to do that stuff. Mr. Holloway finally stepped in. Enough. His voice was low, but it cut through the room like a blade. He walked over, looked down at Tyler, then at the twins. What happened? They attacked us, Tyler said, brushing mat dust off his GE. The quieter twin shook his head. We only responded after being hit first. And after the shove into the wall. Chase rubbed his wrist, avoiding eye contact. I didn't shove him that hard. Mr. Holloway didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at the twins, their stances still perfect, their breathing even, their eyes clear. Then he turned to the class. Everyone, sit. The students dropped to the floor, confused, nervous, some still wide-eyed. Mr. Holloway walked to the center of the mat. Karate isn't about winning fights, he said, voice calm but firm. It's about knowing when not to fight, and when you have no choice. These two, he nodded toward the twins, didn't throw the first punch. They didn't chase. They didn't show off. They defended, and they stopped the moment the threat was neutralized. He turned to Tyler and Chase. You broke 3 rules tonight. No unsanctioned sweeps, no targeting outside drills, and no physical intimidation. You know that. Tyler opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Holloway held up a hand. Next time you sit out. Understand? They nodded, heads down. Then Mr. Holloway did something no one expected. He turned to the twins and bowed, just slightly, but deep enough to mean it. Thank you, he said quietly, for showing restraint. The twins bowed back just as low. After class, most students avoided eye contact as they left. But a few lingered. One younger kid, maybe 12, walked up to the quieter twin. That throw, how'd you do it so smooth? The twins smiled for the first time all night. Practice. And patience. As they walked to the car, the air felt lighter. Not because they'd won, they didn't think of it that way, but because something had shifted. The invisible wall around them had cracked. Back home, they didn't celebrate. They didn't need to. They changed into dry clothes, poured glasses of water, and sat on the garage steps in silence. You think they'll try again? The quieter twin asked. His brother shook his head. Not the same way. Now they know we're not here to play, and that was the truth. The twins never wanted to fight, but they also never wanted to be walked over. There was a difference between peace and passivity, and their grandfather had taught them that line well. The next day at school, things were different. Kids who used to ignore them now nodded in the hallway. A couple of guys from the dojo's beginner class asked if they trained outside class. Just curious, one said. You move like you've been doing this forever. The twins just shrugged. Our grandfather taught us. That seemed to be enough. By Friday, rumors had spread. Not the mean kind, but the respectful kind. Those twins? Yeah, they're legit. Heard they took down Tyler without even trying. Mr. Holloway made them demo Sanchin next week. They didn't correct anyone, didn't brag, just kept showing up, kept training, kept being who they'd always been. Because the real victory wasn't in the throw or the lock. It was in the quiet dignity they carried, even when no one was watching. Even when the world tried to make them small, and now, for the first time since they'd walked into that dojo, they didn't feel like outsiders. They felt like they belonged, not because anyone gave them permission, but because they'd earned it through stillness, strength, and the kind of courage that doesn't need to shout. That night in the garage, they trained again, not out of fear, not out of pride, but out of love for their grandfather, for the art, for the truth that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand your ground and let your actions speak for you. And as the moon rose over the quiet neighborhood, the sound of their synchronized breathing and soft footfalls on concrete was the only noise that mattered. The week after the sparring incident, the air in the dojo changed, not all at once, but slowly, like morning light creeping across a room. People didn't whisper anymore. They watched, not with suspicion, but with something closer to curiosity. Even Tyler and Chase kept to themselves, staying near the back during drills, avoiding eye contact. They weren't apologizing, but they weren't pushing either. That in itself was progress. Mr. Holloway started class that Tuesday with something new. Today, he said, standing tall in the center of the mat, we're going to learn from someone who understands what real discipline looks like. All eyes turned to the twins. They didn't stand up right away. They just looked at each other, then at the instructor, waiting for confirmation. When Mr. Holloway nodded, they rose together, smooth, quiet, no show, and walked to the front of the room. "Show us Sanchin," he said. The twins bowed to the class, then to each other. Without a word, they dropped into stance. What followed wasn't flashy. No high kicks, no spinning moves. Just slow, powerful movements. Arms rising like tides, fists tightening with purpose, feet rooted like trees in storm wind. Their breathing was deep and rhythmic, almost like a chant. Every muscle moved with intention. Every pause held weight. Most students had only seen Sanchin in videos. Fast, stiff, robotic. But this felt alive, like watching two people breathe through their bones. When they finished, the room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds. Then one of the younger kids clapped. Then another. Soon, the whole class was applauding, not out of pity or politeness, but genuine respect. Mr. Holloway stepped forward. "That," he said, "is the heart of karate. Not fighting. Control. Breath. Stillness. Power that doesn't need to prove itself." He turned to the twins. "Would you mind telling us where you learned that?" They hesitated. Not because they were shy, but because talking about their grandfather always made something ache in their chest. The quieter one spoke first. "Our grandfather taught us. He was a Marine, served overseas. When he came home, he opened a small dojo in our neighborhood. Not for money, just to help kids stay focused, stay out of trouble." The other twin added, "He said karate wasn't about belts or trophies. It was about knowing yourself, knowing when to move and when to stand still." A few students shifted, some looking down. One girl wiped her eyes quickly. Mr. Holloway nodded slowly. "How old were you when you started?" 5, they said together. That got a few murmurs. 5 years old, and they moved like seasoned fighters. It made sense now. The calm under pressure, the perfect stances, the way they never wasted motion. After class, something unexpected happened. Tyler and Chase didn't leave right away. They lingered near the water cooler, shuffling their feet like they'd forgotten how to walk straight. Finally, Tyler cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, not looking directly at the twins. "About last week. I was out of line." He didn't say sorry. Not exactly. But the words hung there, heavy with meaning. Chase added, "Yeah, we got carried away." The twins didn't smile, didn't gloat. They just nodded. "Everyone makes mistakes," the quieter one said. "What matters is what you do after." Tyler swallowed. "You think you could show me that block again? The one where you slipped my punch?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a request. The twins exchanged a glance. Then the other one said, "Sure, but you gotta go slow. And listen." For the next 20 minutes, while the rest of the class cleaned up, the 4 of them stayed on the mat. The twins broke down the movement, step by step, breath by breath. Tyler fumbled at first, too tense, too eager. But they didn't laugh, didn't rush him. Just corrected gently like their grandfather used to. "You're thinking too much," the quieter twin said. "Don't fight the motion. Let it happen." Chase tried the wrist redirection next. He kept gripping too hard. "I feel like I'm gonna hurt someone," he admitted. "That's why you practice," the other twin replied. "So when it matters, your body knows what to do, without your ego getting in the way." Mr. Holloway watched from the doorway, arms crossed, but there was a small smile on his face. Later that night, back in the garage, the twins didn't train right away. They sat on the concrete floor, backs against the wall of photos, sipping cold water. "You think they really get it?" the quieter one asked. His brother thought for a moment. "Maybe not all the way, but they're trying." That's more than most people do. And that was true. Most people doubled down when they were wrong. These two? They showed up the next week, not to test but to learn. Word spread beyond the dojo, too. A local community center reached out to Mr. Holloway about starting a youth program. He mentioned the twins. "They've got the skill and the heart," he said. "If they're willing." They were. The following Saturday, they helped run a free workshop for middle schoolers. No belts, no rankings. Just basics. How to stand, how to breathe, how to walk with your head up. Some of the kids were shy. Others were loud, bouncing off the walls. But the twins treated them all the same, with patience, with quiet authority. One boy, small for his age, kept getting pushed around by a bigger kid during partner drills. Instead of stepping in right away, the quieter twin knelt beside him. "You don't have to be strong to start," he said. "You just have to show up. Every day. That's how you get strong." The boy nodded, eyes wide, and tried again. After the workshop, Mr. Holloway pulled the twins aside. You ever think about teaching full-time someday? They looked at each other. We've thought about it, the other twin said. But we want to finish school first. Granddad always said education and discipline go hand in hand. Mr. Holloway smiled. He sounds like a wise man. He was, they said together. At home that evening, their mother came out to the garage. She'd been working double shifts, but tonight she had a rare night off. She leaned against the doorframe, watching them practice slow kata under the bare bulb. You boys are making him proud, she said softly. They stopped. Turned. He'd be smiling, she added. Not just 'cause you can fight, but 'cause you choose not to unless you have to. They didn't say anything, just hugged her, one on each side, the way they used to when they were little. The next week at the dojo, everything felt normal, not perfect, not magical, just normal. Tyler and Chase still made dumb jokes, but they didn't target anyone. They asked questions during drills, actually listened. A few other students started staying late to practice with the twins. Not to copy them, but to learn from them. Mr. Holloway even changed the weekly schedule. Added a foundation segment where students shared where their style came from. Japan, Okinawa, Korea, Brazil. When it was the twins' turn, they talked about how their grandfather blended Goju Ryu with lessons from his time in the service. Discipline from the Marines, patience from his grandmother, rhythm from the streets of their neighborhood. It's not just one thing, the quieter twin said. It's everything that shaped you. That night as they drove home, rain started to fall, soft at first, then steady. They rolled down the windows and let the cool air rush in. You know, the other twin said, I think Granddad would have liked this place. Yeah, the quieter one replied. Not 'cause it's fancy, but 'cause it's becoming what a dojo should be. A place to grow, to stumble, to try again. Not a stage for egos, not a battlefield for pride. Just a mat, a mirror, and the chance to become a little better than you were yesterday. And in that simple truth, they found something they hadn't expected when they first walked through that door. Belonging. Not because they proved they were the strongest, but because they showed up. With humility, with heart, and with the quiet courage to be exactly who they were. No masks, no noise, just two brothers honoring a legacy, one breath at a time, and that more than any throw or block was the real lesson. The tournament day arrived with a sky so clear it looked painted, bright blue, not a cloud in sight. The community center gym had been transformed overnight. Mats laid out in neat squares, banners hanging from the rafters, folding chairs lined up in rows. Parents milled around with coffee cups and nervous smiles. Kids in crisp white G's bounced on their toes, some whispering prayers, others shadowboxing in place. It wasn't a big event, no TV cameras, no prize money, but to everyone there it mattered. The twins arrived early, like always. Not to show off, but to help set up. They carried water coolers, taped down loose corners of the mats, even swept the floor near the registration table. Mr. Holloway watched from across the room, arms crossed, but there was pride in his eyes. These two hadn't just joined his dojo, they'd become part of its heartbeat. When it was time to line up for the opening ceremony, the twins stood at the back of their division, heads high, but not proud. They weren't here to win trophies. They were here because their grandfather used to say, a true martial artist competes not against others, but against the person they were yesterday. Their first match came quickly. The opponent was taller, broader, with flashy kicks and a loud coach shouting from the sidelines. But the twin didn't flinch. He moved like he always did, calm, precise, never wasting energy. When the other boy lunged with a spinning back kick, he sidestepped, caught the leg gently, and guided him down with control. No slam, no show. Just clean technique. The referee raised his hand. Point awarded. The crowd murmured, not in disappointment, but in quiet awe. Across the gym, the other twin faced a girl who'd trained in Taekwondo for years. Fast, sharp, confident. She came in hard, throwing combinations like she'd done this 100 times. But the twin stayed grounded. Blocked low, slipped high, waited. And when she overextended on a roundhouse, he stepped in, applied a light pressure point control, just enough to pause her, and bowed. She blinked, then bowed back. Nice move, she said. He nodded. You too. They didn't speak again, but something passed between them, a mutual respect that needed no words. By midday, both twins had advanced through their brackets. Not because they dominated, but because they never lost control. They never struck harder than needed. Never gloated. Never even raised their voices. And that more than any score caught people's attention. Tyler and Chase were there too, not competing but watching from the front row. They cheered when the twins scored, clapped when they bowed out of matches. At one point, Tyler turned to a younger student and said, "See how he keeps his center? That's what you're missing." It wasn't the same Tyler from weeks ago. Something had shifted in him. Maybe humility. Maybe just the slow dawning that real strength doesn't need to shove others down to stand tall. During a break, Mr. Holloway approached the twins. "You're representing more than this dojo today," he said quietly. "You're showing what this art is really about." They didn't answer right away. Just looked at each other, then at the photos they kept folded in their gear bag. Small, worn prints of their grandfather in uniform standing beside his old garage dojo, smiling like he knew something the world hadn't caught up to yet. "We're just doing what he taught us," the quieter one finally said. "That's enough," Mr. Holloway replied. "More than enough." The finals came in the afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows on the mats. The quieter twin faced a boy from another school, national ranked with a reputation for aggressive sparring. The crowd leaned forward. Even the judges seemed tense, but the twin didn't change his approach. He stayed calm. Let the other boy come to him, blocked, redirected, waited, and when the moment came, a split-second opening after a missed hook, he stepped in, applied a controlled armbar and tapped the mat once to signal submission. The boy tapped back immediately. No argument, no frustration, just respect. As they stood, the boy said, "Your grandfather must have been something." The twin smiled just a little. He was. Meanwhile, the other twin's final match was less about technique and more about patience. His opponent was cautious, defensive, barely throwing a strike. Most fighters would have gotten frustrated, forced the action, but the twin just waited, moved in slow circles, stayed ready. And after 3 minutes of near silence, the judges awarded him the match on superior control and presence. No one booed. No one argued. It felt right. When the medals were handed out, the twins didn't hold them up like trophies. They tucked them into their bags like they were just another part of the journey. But what happened next meant more than any medal. Mr. Holloway stepped onto the center mat and asked for quiet. "Before we close," he said, "I want to thank 2 students who reminded us all what this is really about." He gestured to the twins. They didn't come here to prove they were better than anyone. They came to honor their teacher and to show up with integrity even when no one was watching. The room erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, but real warm, heartfelt cheers. Parents stood. Kids whistled. Even the rival coaches nodded. Afterward, a group of younger students gathered around the twins. "Will you teach us that stance?" one asked. "Can you show us how you stay so calm?" Another added. They didn't say no. They just found a quiet corner of the gym and started demonstrating. Slow, clear, patient. No ego. Just sharing. Later that week, Mr. Holloway announced a new program, a monthly community seminar on the roots of martial arts, led by students who had stories to tell. The twins agreed to co-lead the first one. They talked about Okinawan traditions, about how Goju-ryu blends hardness and softness, about how their grandfather brought those lessons into their neighborhood, not to make fighters, but to build character. Kids from all over the city signed up. Some came from tough schools. Others had never stepped on a mat before. But in that room under the soft lights of the dojo, they all stood the same, feet shoulder width, hands ready, hearts open. The twins didn't become stars. They didn't go viral. They didn't need to. What they built was quieter, deeper, trust, respect, a space where you didn't have to be loud to be seen. At home, life went on. Their mother still worked long hours. School still demanded essays and exams. But now when they walked down the hall, people nodded, not because they were feared, but because they were known. And every evening, without fail, they returned to the garage. Not to train for victory, but to remember, to breathe, to honor the man who taught them that the strongest thing you can be is kind and firm and true to yourself. One night, as they finished their kata under the single bare bulb, their mother came out with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She didn't say much, just handed them the mugs and leaned against the doorframe, watching. "You boys," she said softly. "You carry him with you every day." They nodded, sipped their cocoa. The steam curled into the cool night air. They didn't need grand speeches or medals to know they'd done right by their grandfather. They saw it in the way Tyler now helped new students tie their belts, in the way Chase stayed late to clean the mats, in the way younger kids looked at them, not with fear but with hope, because that's what real strength does. It doesn't crush. It lifts, and in the end, that's all they ever wanted. To stand on the mat not as outsiders, not as threats, but as brothers who showed up with quiet courage, steady hands, and hearts that never forgot where they came from. The dojo wasn't perfect. The world wasn't either. But in that small space, with sweat on the mats and respect in the air, something beautiful had grown, not from winning, but from showing up again and again, with grace. And that, more than any title or belt, was the legacy they'd carry forward. One breath, one block, one bow at a time.